is on site, so she's not online. And while she prepares her PowerPoint, I'm just briefly going to introduce her. Luisa Panicchi is an academic, in the field of modern languages and has been teaching at university level for 30 years. She has a track record of innovation and language teaching and online education. She also works as a consultant in the public education sector in Europe and for the corporate sector in Europe and the US. Of course, she has a very long resume, but I'm just going to focus on her main areas of expertise: language teaching and innovation, learner advising, computer-mediated communication, virtual world platforms for education and training, including science and business. Luisa Panicchi, you can start your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. I will just, yep. Okay, so welcome everybody here and there and there and here. I'm going to talk today about learner advising. It is one of my areas of interest. Now, as you can see from the slide, I have one main job, which is with the University of Pisa, where I am an EFL lecturer, a lecturer of English as a foreign language. And I've also recently qualified as a counsellor within education. Now, we're going to have a quick look at the origins of learner advising as a practice within language education. You don't need to be a counsellor to practice learner advising. That's just the point I wanted to get across. There are lots of professionals, lots of teachers, lots of educators who do carry out learner advising, and it is well within the domain of language teaching. However, in addition to that, as a counsellor, I'll give you an example of some of the activities I actually bring to my work as a language advisor. Okay, so I just wanted to give you that little bit of background. Oh, no, that's not what I wanted to do. How do I, oh, sorry, down the bottom. Okay, so moving on to slide 2. Now, learner advising is generally understood as being an individual one-to-one consultation between a language expert. Sometimes that language expert is a teacher, they might be a tutor, they might be somebody who is only dedicated to providing advising services. It is certainly somebody with experience of language teaching. So it's a consultation between an expert and a language learner, and the topic of these consultations or conversations is the learning of a specific modern language. So what usually happens in a learner advising session is that the learner comes to the expert and talks about a number of aspects that concerns their learning. Okay, that includes learner needs, learner strategies, the use of resources, the target language itself. It might be a problem concerning the language they're learning, and the learning process in general. At the next level, often learner advising sessions tackle other issues on a sort of a different level, and some of these are learner autonomy, to the effective play in relation to their language learning. In some cases, for example, if you're working with students who have busy work lives or busy work schedules outside of their study lives, it may be something helping the student find a way to prioritise their learning needs within that context. Next slide.
No, this end.
So learner advising has been an established practice for after many years, it was actually initially okay.
Okay, can you hear us now from online people?
Yes. Now we can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, but you missed the best bit. What are we going to do?
Continue. It's okay, continue.
Okay, so I was just giving a background on learner advising. So as I was saying, it's an established practice. It sort of was developed in the 80s with adult learning of foreign languages, often in contexts of independent learning. So often you would have students who are trying to learn a language on their own, using resources in self-access centres. And therefore, these language centres would make available to these learners an expert in language learning, to which these learners could turn for advice on resources, strategies, whatever. It is also an established field of research, and a number of areas have been analysed on the topic. What has been seen or discussed as the core element of learner advising is what has been defined as the reflective dialogue. So learner advising practices are based on a dialogue or a conversation between an expert and a learner. And the aim of the dialogue is to help the learner develop an awareness of the processes they are involved in and an awareness of how to become more autonomous and independent in their learning. Okay. Now, there is in the literature you will find, for those of you who are interested, some people refer to this practice as learner advising, some people refer to it as learner counselling. Both terms are used interchangeably. My own personal preference is I use advising to refer to those aspects of the process which are a little bit more practical. So what strategies to use, what textbooks to use, what resources to turn to. And counselling is a term I prefer to use when I'm referring to interactions and conversations about students' emotions in relation to their learning. Okay, but that is a distinction I make. You will find that the literature uses the two terms interchangeably. Okay, slide 4. The context I want to talk to you about today is the University of Pisa. There are two main contexts in which learner advising practices are carried out. One is the language centre, and the other context are the language courses within the different departments. For example, political science, economics, languages, and history and philosophy, to give you an idea. The main difference between these two setups in terms of learners' language learning is the fact that at the language centre, students take a language as an elective subject. It is not compulsory. And therefore, there are implications in terms of their motivation. Within the department-based courses, the language they're studying will generally be a compulsory subject. So there is a lot of, it is a high stake. We can use the term, it's a high stake study process, because often they will be, they have an exam to sit, there are university credits that are awarded, and the learning conditions, as we will see, are slightly more challenging. In general, within the Italian context, Learner advising comes under this umbrella term of ricevimento, which in the Anglo-Saxon tradition is translated as office hours. So office hours, all those contact hours where students come knocking on your door and say, hello, I've got a problem with this. Can you give me some information on that? I need a photocopy about this. In general, traditionally, in the Italian system, in the Anglo-Saxon system, this ricevimento time or office hours in general is dedicated to solving practical issues, providing practical information, especially for students who perhaps for whatever reasons are only part-time students or can't attend courses on campus. However, as we know in language learning, there's also a lot happening in the affective domain of the learner, and often teachers will find that they're also trying to help the student solve problems concerning motivation, overcoming, for example, some of the things we've been seeing today, the fear of speaking in class, embarrassment in using the foreign language. So often the language advisor, who is in this case the language teacher, will also find themselves addressing some of these issues within the framework of ricevimento. Next slide. So at the Language Centre, the students, we provide language courses in a number of languages, 9 languages at the moment, including Italian as a second language. Most of these are European languages. We also teach Arabic, and in the past we also were teaching Chinese and Japanese. We have very small classes, maximum 25 students. We also have self-access facilities available for learners. And the students are motivated because they realize that in addition to other subjects they're studying within their degree courses, they're going to need a language, usually for their future job, future scholarship, international certification, CVs, or for example, we saw this morning a lot of the discussion of English for engineering students because they're in a field where they know that they're going to need English for specific purposes. So they come to the Language Centre and they do additional courses. For many of these students, it's the only opportunity they have to study a foreign language at university because their faculties do not provide for language instruction. And the students are selected based on their language levels. So we run courses at the A1 level, A2 level, C1. So students are divided. They take a placement test, which separates them into levels, which makes it easier for the teacher in the sense that we have a homogeneous group of students in our classrooms. I don't know how I'm doing for time, but I guess somebody will tell me if I'm...
You're okay. You still have 9 minutes, 8 minutes.
Okay, good. Okay. The department-based courses are for undergraduate and postgraduate students. I call them high-stake courses because language is a core component of their study. It is a compulsory exam, and it will have often carry between 9 and 12 credits. And it often, the failure to pass that exam may bar them from taking other subjects or passing to the second year or third year of studies. So there is a lot at stake for students sitting this exam within the department-based courses. The courses can be very, very large. We can have up to 200 students. At one point when we were teaching online, I actually had about 250 students online. Okay, so compared to 25 students, 250, the teacher-learner dynamics change completely. The other problem we have, or the other difference compared to the Language Centre courses, is that we're following a one exam fits all, in the sense that students may be at different levels. We sometimes get students at the A2 level, students at the C1 level, and they're all in the same course together. So it's very hard to cater for the needs of all of the students. There's a higher student-teacher ratio, and considering all these things, we can say that the context is certainly more challenging, both for the student and for the teacher. So, learner advising in these contexts often, for example, for the department-based courses where numbers are high, it is the only opportunity some students have for individual attention from the language teacher. It is practically impossible to give individual one-to-one attention to students when you are dealing with 250 of them. Therefore, for the faculty-based courses, the ricevimento or learner advising moments within that ricevimento context become quite important. Now, before COVID, of course, students would knock on your door. They can't, under COVID, they couldn't knock on your door anymore. And so basically we've moved from face-to-face learner advising to online contexts. And now we've gone from online, going back to the classroom, so we've got hybrid contexts. Therefore, we're no longer face-to-face, we're now hybrid. I don't think we will ever go back to face-to-face. I think this hybrid state, this is my personal experience, will be permanent. And I think there are lots of advantages in the fact that hybrid will become the norm. You can argue that having multiple options for learner advising, so online, offline, face-to-face, Skype, WhatsApp, Moodle, whatever platform you choose, provides the student with greater flexibility and means that the teacher is more readily available to them. Thus, you can argue that there are more opportunities for advisor-advisee interactions. One thing that can be noticed that the different platforms offer different levels or different degrees of privacy, which is something to be taken into consideration. There's also a tradition within Italy and also with my own practices of having large ricevimento groups, meaning we have sort of learner advising sessions, which are sort of like tutorials. So clearly, the privacy levels of tutorials will be different to the privacy level of one-to-one consultations. Some online spaces are more private than others.
5 minutes. Sorry.
Yep, thank you. And you could also argue that individual, perhaps some students, and you also need to take into consideration what preferences students have. Students might have a preference for opening up online more than they do in a face-to-face situation. The different locations we have for learner advising, online, offline, offer different degrees of formality or informality. It may be the case that students in WhatsApp feel that the situation is slightly more informal, and that might, these are just suggestions I'm making, help them make them more likely to open up and talk about some of the issues that are concerning them. So we're seeing changes in mode of access, and in general, thanks to the pandemic, we've also seen an increase in options. But what does this all mean? So the challenge we are facing at the moment is that the right slide? I think it is. Hold on, I just need to double check. Yep. Okay. So we need to see, first of all, if these different models can or should become permanent. Are all of these models conducive, useful, helpful? If so, which ones are more so? Which ones are less so? What are some of the affordances of these particular platforms? What are some of the differences between online and face-to-face interactions within a learner advising context? In terms of learner advising research, there's also a need to analyse the benefits for both the teachers and the learners. And in particular, with regards to ease of access, how easy is it to access these platforms compared to face-to-face interactions? So is it easier to knock on somebody's door, or is it easy to send them a WhatsApp message? I don't know. There might be variations of perception as well as variations which are dependent on technology. What is the quality of experience? Do the students feel equally satisfied that their problems have been addressed online as compared to face-to-face? More so, less so? Or is it a combination of these spaces that leads to the quality of experience? And of course, last but not least, is there an impact on their learning? Okay. And we also need to consider how face-to-face, online, and hybrid combinations can support each other in a vision of the future where hybrid may become standard. So I think I've sort of brought up most of the points I wanted to discuss with you, but I'm welcome for any questions or if you want to know anything in particular about learner advising in general. So thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you very much. So you still have 1 minute left, which is good. So we can use this time for questions. I don't know if anyone in the audience would like to ask questions on site or online. Please go ahead. Okay, no questions. I have one question. You raised very important questions